All right, let's talk about something pretty amazing. All around us, in ways we can't always see, these incredible dramas are playing out in the natural world. We're going to dive into what makes ecosystems tick, and more importantly, what happens when you start messing with the way they're put together.
You know that feeling, right? You're out in the woods, you flip over a log or a rock, and it's just chaos underneath, bugs scattering everywhere. Well, in that split second, you've just busted into a tiny hidden world, a whole ecosystem that was just doing its thing until you showed up. And that's exactly where we're going to start.
So, that little world under the log, it's a perfect, bite sized example of what an ecosystem really is. It's this whole community where the living things, the bugs, the fungus, all that, and the non living things like the dirt, the water, the log itself, are all tangled up together in this complicated dance of survival.
Okay, so let's take a closer look at these worlds, from the super tiny to the absolutely massive, and really get into the forces that are always shaping them.
Here is maybe the most important thing you need to get about any ecosystem. It is never standing still. It's always dynamic. I mean, from the stuff under a rock to a huge ocean, everything is constantly changing, reacting, and adapting. Nothing is ever set in stone.
And, this change doesn't just happen one way. It basically comes in two different flavors. You've got your slow, almost invisible changes, and then you have the big, sudden, dramatic ones.
This chart just nails it. On one side, you've got gradual change. Think about a pond slowly turning into a field over hundreds of years. It's happening, but you'd never notice it day to day. Then, on the other side, bam, sudden change. A forest fire, a flood, a volcano. Scientists have a word for this kind of thing. They call it a disturbance, and it can totally flip the script on an ecosystem in a flash. So to really wrap your head around gradual change, let's just watch a pond's life story on super fast forward. It starts out all nice and clear, full of fish. But give it 100 years and dirt and leaves start filling it in. That feeds more plants. 300 years in, all those dead plants are rotting, and that sucks the oxygen out of the water, which is bad news for the fish. And then, after about 500 years, poof, no more pond. It's a meadow, a total transformation, and not a single big disaster was involved. But here's where it gets really interesting. Whether the change is slow or fast, the effects are almost never what you'd expect. You pull on one little thread over here, and it can cause this massive ripple effect you never saw coming. Let's look at some real-life stories. So, picture this. In the UK and Ireland, you've got this classic showdown. On one side, the native red squirrel. On the other, the invasive gray squirrel, which was brought over from the US. And it's not a fair fight. The grays are bigger, they're bullies, and they carry a disease that's totally harmless to them, but deadly to the reds. For years, it looked like a simple, sad story. The native guys were just going to lose. But nature loves a plot twist. Just when it seemed like the story was over, an old character came back on stage and totally changed everything. So, what happens when a local predator decides to switch up its menu? Meet the pine marten. This little predator is native, but it was almost completely wiped out. Then, after we started protecting it, its population started bouncing back. And get this, researchers noticed that the pine marten started to prefer eating the invasive gray squirrels. Why? Well, they're bigger, they're slower, and they hang out on the ground more. They're just an easier meal. So the comeback of one native species gave another native species a fighting chance. It just shows how connected everything really is.
This whole idea of one thing causing a huge ripple effect, well, that's central to the work of an ecologist named Dr. Rodolfo Dirzo. His research in the oak woodlands of California is a perfect example of what can happen when you take out just one piece of the puzzle.
Scientists call this a trophic cascade, which is really just a fancy way of saying chain reaction. And here's how it worked. Step 1, you get rid of the top predators, the bears and cougars. Step 2, with nothing to hunt them, the deer population just explodes. Step 3, all those hungry deer eat everything in sight, especially the tasty little baby oak trees. And the result? The old oak forest can't make new trees. By removing that one link at the very top, the entire foundation of the forest is put at risk. It's wild.
Okay, so things get knocked down. A fire rages, a key predator vanishes. But even after all that, ecosystems have this incredible ability to bounce back. So let's look at how nature puts itself back together.
And of course, there's a name for this whole rebuilding process. It's called ecological succession. You can think of it like nature's recovery plan,
a predictable series of steps that happens after some kind of big disturbance.
So this recovery basically happens in two main ways. And the biggest difference between them comes down to one simple thing. Is there soil or not? Primary succession is the super slow version. This is what happens on bare rock after, say, a volcano erupts. These tough little pioneer species like lichens have to show up and literally create soil from scratch. It takes forever. But secondary succession happens when the soil is still there, like after a forest fire. Because that foundation is already in place, things can start growing back way, way faster.
So, in a world that is always changing, always getting hit by these disturbances, you have to wonder, why do some species thrive, while others just disappear? Well, a lot of it comes down to their basic strategy for survival.
You've basically got two kinds of players in this game. First, you have the specialists. Think of a koala. It only eats eucalyptus leaves. It's perfectly adapted for that one thing, but that perfection is also its greatest weakness. If the eucalyptus goes, the koala goes with it. Then you have the generalists. These are your raccoons, your cockroaches. They can live anywhere, eat pretty much anything. They're the scrappy survivors, built to just roll with the punches. And that brings us right back to Dr. Durzo and something kind of heavy. When these big changes happen, it's usually the specialists that vanish first. Dr. Durzo actually coined a term for this, defaunation. It's like deforestation, but for animals. It's this idea that human activity is causing a massive drop in animal populations all over the world, and we're creating a planet with way fewer specialists.
And that leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on, doesn't it? We humans, we are the ultimate generalists. We can live anywhere, we can eat anything. But as our own success is driving this global defaunation, wiping out the specialists and shaking up ecosystems everywhere, you have to ask, what kind of future are we actually building? What's our own ecosystem going to look like when all is said and done?